All right. Good morning, everybody. This morning we are talking about the dismissal of the case against, the cases against James Comey and Letitia James. Now, Letitia James was being indicted over mortgage fraud, and James Comey was being indicted over lying to Congress. Obviously, these are two very different cases. It's interesting, then, that they're both being dismissed by the same judge on the same basis. So basically, what you got here, judge dismisses cases against ex-FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Tish James. Federal judge dismissed the Virginia criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James on Monday, finding that the interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan was improperly appointed to her position and had no lawful authority to secure indictments of either President Trump's long-term adversaries. Now, let's clarify, when they say President Trump's long-term adversaries, I just want to remind you, Letitia James literally ran for the office of Attorney General on the platform, I will be the Attorney General who puts Trump in jail. Like that, to say that she is an adversary and to say that she... Okay, so the narrative that let me back up a little bit. The narrative that they're trying to spin here is that Donald Trump is unfairly and unjustly and illegally, they like that language, illegally, right, going after his political enemies, that he's seeking political vengeance against political enemies. I find this very interesting because, like yesterday, we covered, and again, this is activist judges, judicial activism. Patrick asked the question, who appointed the judge? Biden? No. Clinton. Oh, yeah. This bitch has been floating around for a hot minute. But like yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about criminals who were being released on the street because, of course, now one of the big headline stories currently is this beautiful young lady, Beth Magee, who has been partially murdered. I spent a lot of time yesterday on the idea that all crime, if it is crime at all, is murder to a degree, right? If you kill somebody, that is obviously murder. But if you rob from somebody, you are taking from them a piece of their life, right? You steal somebody's car, for example. Well, that person toiled, labored to earn capital in order to purchase that vehicle, which is to say, they traded part of their life for that property, and you have now taken that from them without making them whole. You have made them less. You have murdered them by degree. That's why, personally, I'm a big fan of chopping hands off of thieves, right? I'm totally comfortable with that. So, in the cases of Tish James and James Comey, you have people who have engaged in election tampering, election engineering, fraud, judicial fraud, and all manner of malpractice and maladministration with the explicit, not just obvious intent, but stated intent of causing political damage to Donald Trump for no reason other than he is their political opponent. We just went through 4 years of bizarrely overindulgent lawfare against Donald Trump in which these people were involved. Now, in fairness, James Comey was less directly involved than AG Tish James. But let's not forget that in the midst of multiple close call assassination attempts against the, at the time, the obvious forerunner. Actually, no. Comey's post was after the inauguration, but Donald Trump, having faced several assassination attempts, right? Some of them very, very close calls. I mean, famously, he got shot in the head and drove on. You've got James Comey posting the 8647 meme, which of course went viral because it's a prominent U.S. personality, U.S. government personality, James Comey, former director of the FBI, actively calling for the assassination of Donald Trump, demanding more assassination attempts. Right? Let's not forget, we're talking about people who are constantly telling us that Donald Trump's rhetoric incites violence. Does it? Where? Right? If it were the case that Donald Trump's rhetoric incited violence and that Democrat rhetoric does not incite violence, then Antifa would be wearing MAGA hats. Everywhere that you saw cities burning down, that you saw people being murdered over their political attire, it would be Trump supporters. It'd be guys like me carrying out that violence. And instead, we see the inverse, right? The result is indicative of the reality. The reality is that Democrats are violent. And I know I say it. I know I say it all the time. You know, you go to Hanlon's Razor, and Hanlon says you should never attribute to malice that which could be explained by incompetence. Well, consistent repetition cannot be explained by incompetence. It is not reasonable to argue that if we continue to get the same result, despite having seen this be the result of previous activity, then it cannot be expected anything other than that is the result that you want, right? Throughout history, right? Let's take the example of taxation across the Laffer curve, for example. Throughout history, without exception, every time taxes are increased substantially, tax revenue goes down. And every time taxes are cut substantially, tax revenue goes up. This has to do with the amount of money that's in the system moving around and where that money's allowed to move. You leave the people free to do things with their money by not taxing it away from them. And they make that money do more productive stuff, and so you have a smaller slice of a dramatically larger pie, right? If you have to take your pick, if the thing that you want is more of something, do you want one of 8 slices out of a 16-inch pie pizza, or do you want one of 4 slices out of an 8-inch pizza? This is not complicated, guys, right? The Laffer curve tells us how that's going to go. And yet the Democrat constantly demands taxes be increased to spend more money on people who don't deserve the money. And the result is always and everywhere a decline in tax revenue, an increase in deficit, which translates to an increase in national debt. Right? Every American citizen on birth today has the equivalent of a nice home worth of mortgage that they can never pay off just in their association to the national debt through their citizenship. Why is this important to understand? Why is the habit important to understand? Because, as we see repeatedly, the Democrat does not care about the law. They are not interested in the law. This is especially pernicious, right? We talked yesterday about activist judges blocking Trump's agenda and actively working to put dangerous people on the street, right? The thing that they want. We see the same thing with the seditious six that put out their statement recently about, oh, well, you don't have to follow illegal orders. They want the violence, right? The result that they're getting is not an unintended consequence. The seditious six want American military service members to murder each other. They want to see armed conflict in barracks. What they're looking to inspire the next Bradley Manning to, rather than jeopardize the security of our operations by leaking classified details to a public outlet. Instead of that, they're hoping the next Bradley Manning just goes into a rec room in a barracks while a dozen or so soldiers are trying to watch TV and drink some cold beers and throws a Molotov cocktail. Right? The thing they want is for psychotic repeat offenders to set pretty little white girls on fire on buses. The thing they want is for Donald Trump to be murdered. And the way they're doing it is by encouraging the worst among us. Right, we've talked about this with doxing, for example. You dox somebody, and that means to release all their private information. The most sensitive of which you might think is, oh, well, your social security number, birthday, the stuff that it would take to steal your identity. No. That's the stuff that's going to cause the average person the most headache as far as just dealing with having been doxxed. But what they're really doing when somebody doxes somebody is they're saying, hey, world, I know out of the 8 billion of you out there, or even if this information is only going out across the United States, out of the 3.5 million people out there, I know at least one or two of you are psychotic enough to go to this address and murder this person. I know that there's somebody out there that is the worst case scenario, least safe, bad actor that will take this information and go and rid me of this troublesome priest. Case in point, the case of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. When the black movie, the filmmaker, it was Spike, and I forget if it's Spike Lee or Spike Jones, one of them. Anyway, doxed, thought he had doxed Zimmerman, right? George Zimmerman lives at this address. Be a shame if anybody were to go and protest, and of course, a contingent of heavily armed, Spike Lee, thank you, Patrick. A contingent of heavily armed new Black Panther terrorists showed up to that address to murder the residents there. Luckily, they knocked on the door and discovered that it was the wrong address, and they were just terrorizing this little old white couple. Luckily, they merely terrorized this little old white couple who had the gross misfortune of living at the address to which Spike Lee directed one of the Democrat Party's several terrorist organizations. And Zimmerman was not killed, but that was the intent. When James Comey posted the 8647 seashell arrangement, no intelligent person can make the argument that he didn't understand what he was doing. Right? But that was the defense. Oh, it was innocent. It was just a picture of some seashells on the beach. Bullshit. You're going to sit here and tell me that a man who spent enough time in the U.S. intelligence services, in the FBI, spent enough time there to rise to the leadership, to the top job, to the director of the FBI. You're going to tell me that the modern day Hoover did not understand the meaning of a clear code, right? 8647 target identifier action command brevity code. He didn't understand that. He didn't know that's what that means. He posted it just because it was interesting that there was a series of that somebody put them together that way. Now I can accept that maybe it was somebody else that arranged the seashells in that way. But for Comey to pretend like he did not understand what that meant, that's a lie. Now, interestingly, that is not the lie he told to Congress for which he's been indicted. Comey famously came out with the Clinton investigation over the email scandal and said, not the FBI found no wrongdoing, not Hillary didn't do this crime. He didn't find that the crime wasn't committed. No. In fact, what he said, what he came out and spent an hour waxing poetic about, which was bizarre on its face. You've got the director of the FBI coming out and making specific comments on an ongoing investigation. I'm pretty sure that every other time I've heard a director of the FBI talk about ongoing investigations, what they say is, I cannot comment on the ongoing investigation. No, he came out and said, she did it. She absolutely did it. The evidence is clear. It is incontrovertible that Hillary Clinton maintained multiple non-government private email accounts with privately owned hard servers where she stored official government emails and conducted official government business off of the U.S. information systems, where she is required by law to conduct those conversations and that business, and then destroyed the physical media recording those conversations. But we don't think she meant to do it, so we're not going to charge her with it. Wait, what now? Okay, in that case, right, let's assume for just a moment, for the sake of argument, that intent was an element of the crime. It's not. In this case, the mishandling the government documents, mishandling the documents is the crime. All right? Your intent is absolutely irrelevant. Like I've described before, I could be sitting at my desk working on something. I've got a piece of paper on my desk that is TSSCI no foreign, right? Very highly classified, labeled document. I'm working on it, and then I've also got let's say a manila folder that's got the PT schedule for my unit in it that I'm taking back to my non-classified office outside of the skiff, right? I set the manila folder down and I mistakenly pick up the TSSCI no foreign document that has the kind of information that would be in that kind of a document. And I walk out of the skiff with it. Innocent mistake. I didn't mean to do it. Right? In this hypothetical scenario, it was not on purpose. I didn't go out of my way to hide the document. I just, off of a stack of documents, I happened to pick one up. That's it, buddy. You're done. That's it. You have essentially committed espionage. So, forgetting for a moment that intent is not an element of the crime, they went on to argue about the intent. Let's pretend for just a moment, and it's this simple. even if intent were an element of the crime, that is to be determined in a court of law, right? So Comey is absolutely, like, on the face of it, guilty of lying to Congress and of engaging in election interference. Comey personally engaged in election interference during the 2016 election, right? Now, Tish James, same thing. All this nonsense from 2024 about Trump. Oh, well, he defrauded he defrauded all these banks by doing business with them. All the banks are happy, and he defrauded them. Have you ever paid a little more than you expected to pay for something you wanted, and then you got the thing you wanted, and it was so good that you said to yourself, man, I don't even feel bad about overpaying for this, right? Like, have you ever sat down and said, $5 shake? Man, I guess I'll have to try it. Well, how do you want it? Amos and Andy. And you taste it, you say, that's a pretty fucking good shake. I mean, I don't know if it's $5, but I don't feel bad about it. Right? Like, at worst, that's what happened. At worst, that's what Trump did to the banks, is the banks did a deal with Trump. They made a shitload of money off of it, and they wanted to do more deals with Trump. And that's what Tish James went after him over. Make no mistake, Tish James did not go after Donald Trump because she honestly believed that he defrauded banks. She went after him so that she could publish headlines that said Donald Trump commits fraud. He can't be trusted because he engages in fraud. And it wasn't proved. It was not proved. That case was handled like the Alex Jones case, where a judge said, you know what, summary judgment, I've decided that Alex Jones is guilty. And now when we bring the jury in, they don't get to deliberate over his guilt. All they're here for is to decide how much it's going to cost him. That's how Engeron handled the Trump case, is basically said, I've determined that he's guilty, and now the jury's just here to decide what it's going to cost him. Same thing with the who's the crazy bitch, Eugene Carroll, right? Oh, I've decided that he's guilty of defamatory claims, and so he's civilly liable for his statements about the sexual abuse case, where, by the way, he was acquitted. The jury found, oh, no, there is no credible evidence to the claim. It is not reasonable for a person to believe that Donald Trump sexually assaulted, let alone raped, Eugene Carroll. But then she goes after him and sues him in civil court over his declaration that he was acquitted, calling that a traumatic, well, he traumatized me when he bragged about not raping me. Okay, this bitch has a cat named Vagina. This woman spoke openly on television about fantasizing about being raped. And like Bernie Sanders, she was very clear that she believes that most women fantasize about being raped violently. Yes, you can go look that up too. Bernie Sanders wrote one of his college papers on it. This is who these people are, right? These are Simone de Beauvoir devotees who believe that all sex between male and female partners is always, always, always non-consensual and violent. That a man cannot have sex with a woman without raping her. That is how their minds work. Okay. So what's the real problem here? It's the same problem we have with election interference. mortgage fraud, election interference, calling for the assassination of the president, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just the problem of the two-tier justice system, which is a huge problem. And we actually have apparently a three-tier justice system, right? Where basically what you have is Americans can be prosecuted and indicted for crime. And when I say Americans, I mean the poorest low-income factory worker that doesn't quite qualify for EBT, all the way up to Donald Trump, right? The people that try to color in the lines, those of us who earn a living, pay our own way, do what we're supposed to do. But if you have the correct color skin and either a big or small enough checking account, you essentially get a pass. So if you're a deranged, dangerous lunatic, God, oh my God. I was in Decatur yesterday. I had a contract up there that I had to go knock out, and I got stuck at a red light for a minute. And I'll be honest with you. I considered pulling the dash cam footage off the truck to show you guys to see if the cop angle caught it. I'm sitting at a red light, and this person, and honestly, it was so emaciated that I couldn't really tell male or female. So emaciated and face just ruined by probably meth, because there was a lot of or crack. This was crack. This one was crack. Maybe meth, probably crack. A lot of missing teeth. Bad shape. Comes walking up to me wearing nothing but a ratty t-shirt, like a basic white undershirt t-shirt, and a pair of lacy panties. And I think it was a woman. It was hard to tell. But she walks up, she's got a big gulp in her left hand, and her hand jammed down the front of her panties, moving about suspiciously. Comes up to my truck, to my window. Right, I had the window up, but she comes up and leans in, almost touches her nose to my window, looking in the window. And I'm sitting here just like, I'm begging the light to turn green so I don't have to draw on this bitch, because what? Okay. And she's just wandering the street like that, clearly inebriated. I mean, deeply disturbed, inebriated, just walking around, masturbating in traffic and staring into people's windows. Guys, make the asylums great again. Bring the asylums back. Bring the asylums back. But what happens? Okay, so I want you to think about election fraud for a minute, because we saw what happened in 2020. And like I've discussed on the show many times before, the justice system, by a large margin, looks at election fraud and says, okay, it happens in every election, literally every single election that we have in the United States. There is something that rises to the level of election fraud. Right. Now, under the law, in fairness, under the law, that includes people who move to a new city, get a mail-in ballot, mail it in, and vote in an election in a city that they no longer live in. Right. And right, for this hypothetical, I'm talking like, okay, you moved from Conyers to Covington, and you're a young idiot who doesn't understand that means you need to change your voter registration. So you vote in the Rockdale County election for city council when you get a mail-in ballot and send it back, not realizing that what you've just done amounts to voter fraud. Okay, so some of the voter fraud is that. That is not the majority. But the justice system says that it happens in every election, and it happens so much that we cannot prosecute all of it. And so for the sake of fairness, we choose to prosecute none of it. So there's zero appetite in the judiciary for prosecuting voter fraud in particular. And that's not just because Clinton and Obama did quite a good job of appointing and finagling in Soros-backed judges all over the country, liberal activist judges all over the country. It's also just a sheer volume overwhelming the system problem. And then here's the rest of that problem. In every case where election fraud is occurring, you have one of two things that happens. Either the fraudsters are successful, they win their election and take power, in which case they're not going to investigate, indict, prosecute themselves. Right? So when the election fraudsters win, they get away with it because they're not going to go after themselves. When they fail, they've done the fraud, but they didn't fraud enough, and they still lose the election. Then the winner doesn't see the fraud as a problem because it was unsuccessful. And so they don't pursue it either. Okay? We're seeing a similar phenomenon here. The lawfare against Donald Trump was very largely unsuccessful. And it aggravates me to see things like Tish James being charged over mortgage fraud. Okay, there's a certain ironic comedy to it, sure. But Jesus Christ, malicious prosecution. The mechanisms through which the Democrats pursued consistent lawfare were fraud. Right? It is a crime. It is a crime to pursue someone for a crime which you know they didn't commit. It is illegal in the United States to harm innocent people. I mean, at the barest minimum, Tish James was in violation over the suppression of civil liberties under color of law. She went out there pretending to be an AG. And I say pretending to be an AG because you're not in good conduct. You're not in the office. And used her authority as a government agent to suppress the civil liberties of Donald Trump and his lawyers and his supporters. And I would say that given that we're talking about who takes command of the United States military, that violation of 242 absolutely rises to imminent threat of death of serious bodily injury, in which case, yes, go read the statute, U.S. Code 18, Section 242, suppression of civil liberties under color of law is absolutely punishable with the death penalty if the suppression of liberties rises to the point that it threatens to cause the death and bodily harm, grievous bodily harm of the victim. But Trump won the election. And so his administration isn't taking this seriously. The fact that James Comey is not going to be put in front of a firing squad guarantees you that the other activists like him, oh, hey, chickens, that other anti-American activists like himself will continue to encourage and support and send money like Kamala Harris to actively encourage and build up these activist organizations for the purpose of causing the death of our president, our favorite elected officials, not that we have a lot that we're particularly fond of, our young women, our children, and ourselves. Bodies in the street is the thing that they want. And these these Clinton judges, Biden judges, Obama judges, they're actively working to make sure that the most dangerous, violent criminals remain on the street. It's that simple. What we need to see is Republicans with enough spine to impeach and incarcerate judges. Not just remove them from the bench. They should be ruined. I mean, ruined. They need to lose everything that they've built through their fraud and activism. Absolute destitution. All right, guys, I got to put a pin in it there because I got to be in Macon in 2 hours. Jesus. All right, y'all be safe. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow. Oh, no, that's the wrong button. I almost cut the show off without the outro. Oh, that would have been sloppy.